Welcome to the 13 most tragic tech fails ever. Products and companies so dreadful that they died an instant death and need to be buried 6 feet under. Let's commemorate them. Beautiful service, isn't it? And it all starts with GoPro, who in 2024 decided to release the Hero 4K, their cheapest ever action camera at $199, literally half the price of the flagship Hero 13 Black. It's a nice idea. I'd say most of GoPro's current users are enthusiasts willing to sink a lot of money into their extreme adventurous hobbies. So the GoPro 4K was the company's way of pricing themselves to be affordable to the masses. You know, the people who just want to go pro on a walk. The problem, though, is that to hit this $199 price, they had to scale back key features. I feel like I've used microwaves with better-looking interfaces than this, and massively reduce the video and stabilization quality. And nowadays, you don't have to reduce that quality by very much until it is quite literally worse than the camera that everyone is already carrying around in their pocket anyway. I mean, actually, to be honest, forget the iPhone 16 Pro Max. If we just take an iPhone 13, even with this, the iPhone is still significantly better quality, not to mention like 100 times easier because you're not having to faff around with SD cards. And to top it off, the iPhone still has an action mode, which turns out is actually better than the GoPro stabilization. So this thing is not useful for the people who wouldn't normally be interested in action cameras, and it's not good enough for the people who already care about action cameras, making it basically dead on arrival. 1 out of 10 tech fail. But if you thought GoPro had cornered the market on trying to please everyone and actually in the process pleasing no one, then you might have forgotten about Sonic. Since Sonic 3 has come out and we're all used to how he looks now in the movies, feels like a good time to remind everyone about that initial trailer. Oh my God. People were outraged that this is how their beloved childhood hedgehog friend was being portrayed. The uncanny valley human-like proportions, the weird spaced-out eyes, the teeth. I can guarantee those teeth will have appeared in children's nightmares across the globe. The reaction was so strong that Paramount decided to make a massive, publicly embarrassing U-turn, announcing that they would redesign and reanimate Sonic from scratch, which cost them an estimated $5 million and delayed the movie by a full 3 months. Gotta go. Not so fast. Here's the interesting twist. If we were in the Paramount boardroom at the time this was happening, we'd have been freaking out about the now soiled reputation of our company. This is one of those rare tech fails in which the company saw what they did wrong, they suppressed their ego, they apologized, and they managed to still win from the situation by fixing it at their own cost. Like, that $5 million investment played, I'm sure, a massive part in this movie going on to gross $149 million at the US-Canada box office, completely flipping Paramount's reputation into them being the heroes and even spawning 2 sequels where they brought in Tails, Knuckles, and even Shadow in the same style that fans now happily accepted, pushing the franchise past the $1 billion mark worldwide. So again, can't really give this more than a 1 out of 10 fail. But now things start to get real somber. This is Moxy, the $800 emotional support AI robot for children, which in itself is already one of the strangest sentences I've said this year. So the idea of Moxy is interesting, at the very least. It was designed by a bunch of neuroscientists and child development specialists to basically help parents to teach their kids social skills. So, kids would interact with it. They're specifically meant to form a close bond with it. And the thing was pretty advanced. It used a proprietary mix of AI technologies, including ChatGPT, to regulate its facial expressions depending on the tone of the conversation. And it could also soar up to 4 profiles, so that its interactions with different kids in the same household are all unique. But then, just about the worst thing that could possibly happen happened. Embodied, the startup behind Moxy, sent out an email announcing that the bot is shutting down, leaving the parents with the job of gently explaining to their very young children why their best friend is disappearing. Answer, because the company failed to secure additional funding. But this was heartbreaking stuff to the kids who basically have to watch their friend die, since because it's using cloud-based servers, once the servers are shut down, the robots can't function. Oh yeah, and no refunds, is what they said. But the icing on the casket, in this poetic, dystopian, Blade Runner-esque twist, the final shutdown email also included suggestions on how parents should break the news to their now devastated children. Yeah, this probably backfired so hard. 2 out of 10 fail. So, there's a good chance that you've heard of the pretty successful Steam Deck, probably the most mainstream handheld gaming computer ever. But did you know that the Steam Deck wasn't actually the company's first attempt at a console. See, in 2015, there were two primary types of gamers. There were the PC gamers who got the highest end graphics, as well as cheaper games with free online play, but they had to sit upright at a desk. And then there were the console gamers who got to lay back on a couch but had a lesser gaming experience due to a lack of console power. Enter the Steam machines. The idea was to offer people the power of the PC with the convenience of the console. So, Valve, the company behind Steam, created this brand new, very unique controller with two clickable touchpads for mouse-like controls, and they partnered with a bunch of PC vendors, companies like Alienware, to offer buyers a number of different spec options. So each of these Steam machines was like a normal PC, but just instead of running Windows, because Windows was designed for mouse and keyboard, and even to this day you can't properly navigate with a controller, and because the CEO of Valve specifically hated the Windows 8 that was out at the time, calling it a catastrophe for everyone in the PC space, these machines ran on the new self-developed Linux-based SteamOS. The problem was that the vast majority of games designed for Windows couldn't actually run on these. Only about 20% of the library of games on Steam could actually run on the Steam machines. And even the games that did run ran slower, since they'd been primarily optimized for Windows first. And to top the whole thing off, in a cruel twist of fate, Windows 10 dropped only a few months before the first Steam machines actually started shipping, which fixed a lot of the issues that people were having with Windows 8, and it was a free upgrade for the first time ever, making the Steam machines very quickly run out of steam. Rest in PC. Made only slightly more bearable by the fact that this failure was essential for the newer Steam Deck to have been a success, since it led the company to develop a compatibility layer called Proton, which is what allows Windows games to now run smoothly on Linux. While we're on gaming though, does anyone remember that time when Elon Musk claimed to be one of the world's top 20 Diablo 4 players on Joe Rogan's podcast, and then when people checked, he actually surprisingly was on the leaderboard? I mean, if I spent as much of my day-to-day on X as Musk does, then I reckon I'd have to be some sort of demigod of innate gamer skill to also have a career as busy as his and be that good at any game, let alone something as insanely time-consuming as Diablo. Anyway, fast forward a couple of months, on the 7th of January this year, Elon streamed himself playing Path of Exile 2, which is another hack-and-slash RPG game that's pretty Diablo-like. And as you'd expect from gamer deity Elon Musk, his character was insanely maxed out. He literally had gear better than streamers whose entire job was to play this game all day. But I guess that makes sense, since just a few days earlier, he tweeted boasting about how his hardcore character had made it to number 59 in the world. He is actually so good at this game that his account was online while he was sitting at Trump's inauguration. How does he do it? Well, you know what didn't make sense? The game itself. To Elon. People immediately got suspicious because he had all of this absolutely insane gear, but when he was live streaming, he was acting like someone who'd literally never played the game before. Like, for example, completely ignoring a Chaos Orb, one of the rarest currencies in the game. He keeps trying to pick up an item despite having a full inventory. You get the sense that he doesn't understand why his click isn't doing anything. Elon confuses item level with required level, causing him to lament that his unbelievably busted top-tier gear is only level 62. But by far my favorite, most damning and just all-out cringe offense. On the stream, he only plays maps from a folder clearly titled Elon's Maps, which can only mean one of two things. One, that he has paid someone to play this account for him, and they're the ones who've set aside some easy maps for him to play on stream so that he doesn't get annihilated while bragging to the world about how he wishes he could make the game harder. He literally did that, by the way. Or two, Elon just decided to actually name his map folder after himself, which, to be honest, might actually just be even worse. So anyway, the internet pretty quickly figured it out, and Elon admitted in DMs to YouTuber Nicorex that he had been having someone else boost his account, and he did also confirm that he was the one playing on those streams, but we got that part. I mean, in the end, it is just a video game, but there's just something so tragic about how incredibly 1000% his own fault this is. Like, it's a total, massively public self-own for one of the most famous people on the planet. Thankfully, we can all rest assured that at least that was the worst thing that he did all week. Right? But enough hating the player. It's time to hate the game. Do you remember Overwatch. Overwatch was such a fun hero shooter. It was so instantly accessible. Every character was so unique and interesting, and the world they lived in was so engaging that even people who'd never picked up a shooter before were playing this game. I remember the hype every time they teased the release of the character Doomfist, the way they embedded the lore of his character within the core gameplay. And this level of immersion is why the one thing that the entire fanbase was clamoring for was just a campaign mode. Something with a bit of actual storytelling, as opposed to just having random heroes go head-to-head over and over again online. So, imagine the hype levels when the trailer for Overwatch 2 dropped at BlizzCon 2019. A brand new game with a campaign story mode being one of the main focuses. And then when it came to release in 2022, Blizzard announced that they'd also be shutting down the original Overwatch a couple of days before number 2 drops, which some people did not love, understandably. But hey, I figured that if number 2 is everything that it's hyped up to be, then this is all just adding to the anticipation for that sudden go moment. Then it launched, and it was a disaster. For a start, you could not get on. The game was hit with a DDoS attack on launch, basically an overload on the servers for which the company was totally unprepared for. So for the vast majority of players, the game was literally unplayable. Lots of people's stuff from Overwatch 1, the skins, the currency, had vanished in the process of merging accounts with number 2. You had to queue to play, which happens in these types of games, but sometimes behind 40,000 people in this case. The list goes on, all of which maybe would have been forgivable if the game was actually good. But it's just basically the same thing, except now battles were 5 versus 5 instead of 6 versus 6. So now I have even less friends. And then on top of that, they'd added a dreaded battle pass. They'd bumped up the prices on cosmetics, including a charm that worked out to cost more in-game than the real-life version that Blizzard sells. You just can't make this stuff up. And they made it so hard to earn new characters that you basically had to pay for them, which immediately creates an uneven playing field, which is like the primary stabilizing force of an online game like this. People were so anguished that over 90% of the reviews on Steam were negative. This was the lowest rated Steam game of all time. And so it feels like at this point, Blizzard just decided, you know what? We screwed it up anyway. You remember that campaign mode that we talked about? You know, the main new thing that Overwatch 2 was made for? Yeah, well, we're not making it anymore. And as if they needed it, it feels like the new Marvel Rivals game has just been the nail in the coffin. A similar game that seems to have learned from Overwatch's lessons and has single-handedly stolen a further 39% of the game's player base. F's in the chat for Overwatch. But now we go from fixing what ain't broke to fixing nothing at all. This is the monumentally dumb 2022 Spotify car thing. And yes, that's its real name. So, you whack one of these in your car, specifically a car that doesn't already have Bluetooth or an entertainment display, and this gives you full access to Spotify that can be controlled with both touch and voice commands, which actually sounds kind of nice. And to look at, I won't lie to you, this is one sexy piece of hardware. Daddy chill. So, I'm not surprised that over 2 million people signed up for the initial waitlist. Also, this really is just a fantastic feeling knob. But then it launched. It was $89.99. You had to have a Spotify premium subscription to buy one. The interface was trash and kind of laggy for a lot of people. Voice commands work, well, about as well as voice commands normally work. I mean, this feels like a pretty good example of my point. The lights are on and nobody's home. But more fundamentally, it turns out that the car thing didn't play music on its own. This is just a controller for the Spotify app that you already have on your phone, which can already be controlled by your voice. And then factor in that the only people this is potentially maybe useful for are people driving older, cheaper cars that don't have an inbuilt way to play music from your phone. Are those the people that are going to want to pay $90 plus a subscription to add a completely unnecessary extra step into their music listening process? So Spotify slashed the price to $49.99 and then they slashed it again to $30 just a few weeks later. They really were out here just digging deeper and deeper into their own grave, because you know tech fails well enough at this point to know that it gets even worse. Because then, in May 2024, Spotify announced that they would be ending support for the car thing by the end of the year. Does that mean they become car nothings? Oh, and no refunds. Sucks. Sorry, not sorry. Cry about it. Spotify, probably. They'd offer people a few months of free premium if you reached out and specifically complained about it, but that just felt like a slap in the face, really. And they even offered some refunds on the down low for people who were really persistent, but they never came out and made that open to the public. Sneaky. So, that same month, customers filed a class action lawsuit against Spotify for bricking the devices they paid for, alleging that they would not have purchased the device if they'd known Spotify was going to pull the plug on them within only a few months, which makes total sense. So, there was a hardware screw-up from a company well respected for their software. Well, the Sonos app redesign in May 2024 was the exact